my name is Panta Rhei. I have the pleasure and the privilege to chair this session. My first duty, but this is also a pleasure, to express my acknowledgement to the integration fund of the European Union, putting political priority and providing funding for this very important and of growing importance issue. We'll go back to this, but just have a start with the introductory speeches. It's my privilege to invite Katalin Farkas, Prorector of the Central European University, for her introduction.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me to say a few words at the beginning of this event. In April 14th, there was a conference, and I also had the luck and fortune to introduce on the occasional publication of MIPEX 3, the Migrant Integration Policy Index. That conference addressed various issues about migrant integration, in particular with respect to equal opportunities, education and labour markets. And I thought it was a very good occasion to have a somewhat broader overview of the challenges and opportunities that emerge in the course of integration of migrants. And now I'm very glad that we have an opportunity to, as it were, follow up this topic and have to zoom in on the one particular aspect and have a closer look at the issue of labour market integration, in particular in Hungary, discussing the opportunities in the midst for third country nationals. We're very fortunate to have the opportunity again to cooperate with the British Embassy and the British Council. I'm delighted to have the ceremony room held again. And I'm also very glad that we have some new partners in this, especially the Panta Rhei Institute, which took a leading part in this project, and we're also very grateful for the assistance of the Soviet Federation at the time. Now, integration, of course, has many aspects, issues of discrimination, education, which are very natural subjects of study at this university, and these things have to do with events that happen in people's heads. But of course, there is an economic reality behind all this, and that's the opportunity for people to find proper integration in the labour market. And it's also a question, obviously, for the home country, because having people who are coming here and taking over in our country is also something that brings considerable opportunities and economic benefits. This is a very good topic for Central European University. The university has a very clear mission to engage theory and practice, to look at the policy implications of various overarching themes, smaller or broader themes, social change. And we have a commitment to looking at real-life problems which affect the lives of many individuals. It's also a good topic for CEU, as I may have mentioned on a previous occasion, because our community is a very international community, and many members of the CEU community have a first-hand personal experience of the challenges and opportunities that stem from trying to integrate in the labour market as immigrants. So many thanks to all of you for coming, Martin, to assist this event on behalf of CEU for Panta Rhei Foundation, and I wish you a good day.
Prorector, before giving the floor to you, I would like to express our appreciation and acknowledgement for the university. I think this is really a topic for you from one side, and thank you both for this fantastic site. It's a pleasure Monday morning to be sitting in such a place, but also thank you very much for the moral support and the technical contribution. So, then the next speaker will be the director of the British Council, Mr. Simon Ingram here. We are really privileged having you here, and we appreciate very much your personal interest and the interest of the British Council towards these issues related to migration. Your presence here is a very important political, moral, and technical support for us. Also, thank you for supporting us in the organizing process.
Thanks very much. Provost, Captain Farkas of CEU, Peter Makalam, Professor of Public Policy, Panta Rhei, dear guests. Of course, I'm delighted to be here this morning at the beginning of this conference to discuss the challenges for labour market integration in Hungary. As Dr. Farkas has just mentioned, in mid-April, when the British Council launched with its partners the results of the third instalment of the Migration Integration Policy Index, MIPEX 3 for short, because it's the third one in the series. Those at the event, which was hosted by the CEU, with very strong participation from the CEU as well as other partners, those at the event were, I think, very much encouraged by the level of the debate and the importance attached by the many speakers and participants to the situation in Hungary, hence today. MIPEX 3, just to make a comment about MIPEX 3 for a moment, involved 31 countries in Europe and North America and was presented and indeed accepted as an important, transparent and objective tool for EU policymakers in assessing, comparing, contrasting and suggesting improvements to the integration policies of all our countries. There were 7 policy areas covered by MIPEX 3, and the April event, which we'll be referring to, discussed 3 of them: anti-discrimination policy, education and labour market mobility. Today's conference, I suspect, will overlap the most with this third area, labour market mobility, but touch at least in part on the other 2. And we'll want to go further with the purpose of continuing to draw attention to policymakers in Hungary recommending improvements for the future. We have noted elsewhere, and it was highlighted in the MIPEX 3 documents, that Hungary itself has shown real leadership in anti-discrimination legislation and should be proud to share best practice with others. But, on the other hand, it has also recognised that it has some way to go before it can claim good practice, for example, in the educational arena. Discrimination and outright racism is certainly something that is faced by immigrants in many countries, not least in the UK. Though we have seen significant strides forward for migrant communities as anti-discrimination legislation has become stronger over the last few decades. At the same time, the 2007 MIPEX 2 report criticised the United Kingdom for not being well enough prepared and overly bureaucratic in dealing with the large number of EU citizens coming to the UK from the 2004 EU accession countries, including, of course, Hungary. That said, our Equality Act of 2010 has provided a new framework to address a number of our shortcomings in policy to benefit the migrant population and to advance equality of opportunity and contribute to a more equal society, while at the same time preventing the unfair treatment of individuals and protecting their rights. These principles underpin a number of the projects that the British Council is involved with in Hungary, as elsewhere. Examples here include empowerment training for Roma students entering university, English language training for the public administration Roma interns, where we work closely with the Open Society Foundation here. Projects with communities in Hungary County, and as many of you will know, Hungary County is a county that has its own fair share of disadvantaged groups, and leadership training for diverse groups of students in schools in Budapest. In all, the protection of individual rights and the fulfillment of their expectations and potential is close to our stated objectives, just as is the importance of projects and conferences like this one that bring people together to share best practice and identify areas of improvement. Turning back to the subject of today's conference, I would anticipate that one arena you will be looking at is how Hungary can put in place a better strategy to attract suitable migrants, many of whom will be ethnic Hungarians from neighbouring countries. Attracting suitable talent from other countries, a focus of the the Hungarian EU presidency in one of the informal meetings that Hungary was hosting in the educational arena, by the way. But the attracting of suitable talent from other countries is, after all, very much at the heart of integration strategies, and Hungary has its own set of challenges to want to make this more evident. Just to close, I would like to thank the organisers once again for today's conference. I'd like particularly to thank CEU for hosting, and we've been collaborating before, we'll be collaborating in the future, I'm quite sure, on subjects which are close to all of our hearts. I look forward to our collaborations in the future. And thank you for our collaboration in this event, and thank you for offering me the opportunity to say some words. So thank you very much, and a successful day to you, and successful presentations and discussions for the rest of the morning. Thank you very much.
Now I give the floor for myself. Thank you very much once again for this introductory speech, and I have to say the Hungarian research community appreciates very much the activities of British Council in this field, and I strongly promise you we don't limit ourselves today on only the labour market issue. We will discuss in a broader terms, including the issues of discrimination, segregation, whatever, and education also in this field. So, good introduction should be short. I think there are two overlapping ideas behind this workshop. First, to present the empirical evidence, the suggestions, the proposed scenarios made by the research of Panta Rhei, supported by the EU fund. But from the other side, nearly all of you contributed in some way to this research, and all we are stakeholders of a potential dialogue on migration in Hungary. The Hungarian policy making, and also that's more or less true at EU level, has a kind of double bind, a schizophrenic situation facing the challenges of migration. From one side, the demographic processes, the labour market interest would be, I would say, pro-migrant. But from the other side, national security reasons, xenophobia, even paranoia sometimes in some parts of public administration, but also in the public opinion, are rather against migration in this field. And what is certainly, at the moment there is no broad strategy in Hungary for tackling issues of migration, partly presently for understandable reasons, and no doubt the present situation of facing the crisis management and the short-term interest of the Hungarian policy making are marginalized, partly for understandable reasons. But if we look at the future, the situation is quite different. And there is a lot of elements in Hungarian policy making for shaping a good strategy. But maybe the most important one, there is no broad framework for dialogue, debating the very controversial issues of migration from different perspectives. There are arguments pro and con from different social positions, from different professional perspectives. And I hope this workshop will be one step, one milestone in an ongoing process. Also, British Council is offering, CEU is offering this type of opportunities, and we have to think about different options, different issues of migration today, not just limiting ourselves for this nice research, I have to say, but using this opportunity to thinking in a strategic way and on an evidence-based analysis how to shape realistic policy options for the Hungarian future developments. So that's for the introduction, and now it's my pleasure to invite Professor Gahanes to make his presentation.
Okay. Good morning. I would like to first thank you all very much for coming. I'm really glad that this topic got so much interest, and I would like to especially thank the organizers for inviting me to present some parts of my research at this event. What I'm going to talk about is the European migration to the situation of immigrants in European labor markets. And I'm going to take you through three themes. Now, the first one is the demographic context and the need for immigrants in Europe. Now, then I'll take you through some statistics about whether we actually have some immigrants in Europe and how they do. And finally, I'll provide you with immigration and integration policy. Oh, okay. Thank you for this. Now, can you see the slide? I'll take you through immigration and integration policy perspectives. Now, concerning the demographic background, Europe faces a number of... Okay, how shall we do this? Maybe I just move the computer over here. Okay. Now this seems to work. Is this better? Okay. Yeah, okay, perfect. So okay. The demographic background. Now, Europe faces a number of challenges concerning its demography. The first one, and the sort of prominent one everybody talks about, is its aging population. This is connected to scarcity of skilled labor, where Europe doesn't seem to be able to educate and train sufficient numbers of sufficiently skilled workers. Now, this causes what I call the dynamic loss in the economy, innovation deficits, which I'll talk about in a while. And it also causes problems in the financial sector and social security system. Now, the recent crisis adds to the problems because on the background of aging population, too few young workers, we have on top of that rising risk aversion. So not only we have fewer people that would fuel the innovation potential, but also those people seem to be more risk averse given the financial and economic crisis. Now this results in economic decline, or at least not enough dynamics in the economy, and negative attitudes towards immigrants. And you've seen this happening all over Europe, rising fears of immigration, and sometimes we observe signals that some people would like to fortress Europe without immigration. If you look at a few statistics, we see that the share of working age population is decreasing in Europe. This is projection from 2005 to 2020. and we see most countries with red bars. This means the share of working age population is expected to decline over the next 15 years or so. There are only a few exceptions. So in fact, intra-European mobility, what we the message we should get from this is that intra-European mobility is not sufficient to alleviate the problem of aging population. Because even if these few countries, even if all these people would leave these countries and go to the other countries, this is not sufficient. Most countries have red bars. So reallocation of workers is not going to work. The picture is even more clear if you look at old age dependence ratios. This is the share of elderly people in the population, and we see it's expected to rise in all over Europe. Now this means, and now we can back to the innovation potential, we see aging population. This means lower shares of young workers, young and mobile workers, and as we know, it's especially the younger workers that that are mobile, that bring in new ideas, and this seems to be a problem that we do not have that many of such people in Europe. But should we hope for intra-European migration to somehow cushion the effects of aging? Well, I'll argue not, and this picture even confirms that expectation even stronger. We see that mobility in Europe is quite low anyway, so the mobility would not help too much, and it's low anyway. So what we need is immigration from outside the European Union. We asked, in a different research project, we asked 234 labor market experts from all over Europe. This was sort of they wanted to gain some insights into, okay, is this argument, or is this picture somehow consistent with with what experts think about this? So we surveyed these labor market experts, and the results were quite strong in the sense that 89% of them says that EU needs at least as many immigrants as it has now, and 57.7% say that actually Europe needs more or many more immigrants. There was somewhat less conviction that the EU needs low-skilled migration, low-skilled immigration. The corresponding numbers were 60.7 and 27.3. However, almost all of those experts say that the EU needs at least as many high-skilled migrants, and 80% of them say that the EU needs more or many more high-skilled migrants. Is this finding sensitive to the crisis? We find not really. The long-term need for immigrants seems to be a robust finding and a robust phenomenon. So there is need for immigrants, and the question now is, do we have them, and how do they look like? So migrants in Europe. If you look at this table, we see the shares of immigrants in population in EU 27. We see quite some variation. Some countries, especially in the new member states, have very, very low shares of foreign-born or people or foreign citizens. In the rest of Europe, in EU 15, we observe variation. Most countries have actually substantial proportions of immigrants. And if you look at the trends, again, quite some variation, but predominantly growing numbers of immigrants. If you look at Hungary, there is quite a steep increase in immigration. If you look at the Czech Republic, back here, this figure still says something like 0.4, 1.3, 0.6%. The recent figure, the most recent figure, is 4.5% of labor force is foreign-born in the Czech Republic. So this is quite a fluid migration is about flows of people. So this is a static view, but there is quite some dynamics in how immigrant populations change in Europe. If you look at Germany, the interesting fact is that immigration is on decline there, and I should also tell you that without post-enlargement immigration, Germany would have negative migration flows. Despite the transition arrangements, so many people came to Germany from the new member states that they actually caused Germany to have positive immigration rates, but without that, Germany would have negative migration. And also, that's a new phenomenon, Germans are leaving. Okay? Germans are leaving. It's the immigrants from the new member states actually compensated for that trend that Germans are on net are leaving Germany, which is quite a, given the history over the past 50 years, that's quite a change. Now, how are these migrants? Are they educated? Well, the usual perception is migrants are those people who clean the streets. Is this really what the data tell us? Well, if you look at their education, what we observe is that, let's just have a look here, EU 15, this is the share of highly educated natives, medium educated natives, and low educated natives. If you look at immigrants from, immigrants pulled all immigrants, then we see that the share of high-skilled immigrants is larger than that of natives, and there are, if you look at the immigrants from non-EU countries, we see again the same picture that immigrants are slightly more educated than the natives. This is the case also for Hungary, for example, where the share of high-skilled immigrants, the share of high-skilled people among immigrants is higher than the corresponding figure for the natives. So at least from the data, that picture that immigrants are low-skilled is not substantiated. Although one should say that some countries do have less skilled immigrants. Now, if you look at if you try to summarize this evidence, in Central and Eastern Europe we have few immigrants, which is not so good given the demographic problems, but their numbers are growing and they are relatively skilled. If you look at the rest of Europe, in EU 15, the situation is different across different countries. For example, Ireland, Denmark, and the UK have substantial populations of skilled migrants. They seem to be able to attract more skilled immigrants, whereas Austria, Germany, and the Netherlands attract less skilled immigrants. The reasons, I let you wonder about this, but this has to do with immigration policy and also not only the formal policy, the explicit policy, but also some tacit policies and the perception of these countries among potential immigrants. Now the question would be what policies are needed, because although immigrants are, let's say, fairly educated, we do see them in jobs which are less skilled, and we observe some downskilling. People with higher education do lower skilled jobs. So we do have some problems concerning immigration in Europe. It's not only as trivial as to attract new immigrants. If you say, okay, we have demographic problems, and the solution is to import young and able and working and strong leadership labor market immigrants. We also need, those policies should be more fine-tuned, and also we need integration policies. So let's have a look at those. The background, as I mentioned, we have bad demographics, we need immigrants, at least that's what experts say, at least that's what we can easily argue based on the European demography. Empirical evidence on the effects of, many people, many policymakers, and media. You observe this in the discourse. You observe that many people fear immigration. So people say, okay, these immigrants are taking our jobs. You know the Polish plumber argument and similar things. So we actually run a big project about this, and we try to find out, okay, is this really true? Is the Polish plumber really taking the jobs of an Irish plumber or a British plumber, etc.? generally the evidence is that the effects of migration on, or immigration on native population is generally non-negative. There might be some local reallocation, of course, but there are also many positive effects documented. So an example, in Ireland, what we find that Ireland got really enormous influx of immigrants after enlightenment. So this is a good case study. If you want to find negative effects, then Ireland would be the first case to look at, because they had enormous immigration, and now one would expect, okay, such an enormous immigration should have caused some, if the arguments are true, should have caused some trouble there. What we find is that there was very, very little of it. Even in sectors where some displacement took place, the natives found jobs elsewhere. So the unemployment rate of the natives did not go up. There was some reallocation, but on aggregate, there was no negative effect on the Irish economy. Quite the contrary, the strong economic growth in Ireland seemed to have been also fueled by those large numbers of immigrants. We do not have many immigrants in Central and Eastern Europe, but we do have large numbers of immigrants in EU15, but their integration is a challenge, as we also know from MyBex, where integration policies are well documented and seem to be quite problematic in many countries. We also asked the same experts in the same survey just to get some insights into what policies do they think might work. We provided them a number of options. And what we found is that most of them favor job-dependent immigration. Of course, this is about economic migration. Okay, there is humanitarian migration. We are not concerned with that in this presentation. That's a different story. But here, talking about economic migration, job-dependent migration was one of the two most favored principles of immigration policy. And the second one was positive selection on education or skill. Okay, not so surprising in this audience, but apparently not so much embraced by those who design immigration policies. Also, selection based on language skill got quite some support, and open borders, just open borders. And let them in. Received quite favorite. Okay, now let's assume that we, for a moment, have solved we have enough immigrants in our countries, in concerning numbers. We are able to attract the highest of immigrants from the pool of migrants. But then this all can work only if these immigrants are integrated. So the argument about aging population and the need for immigrants, and then we say, okay, now we have enough immigrants, but what still might be missing is that these immigrants might be not integrated in the society. So the question is, are the immigrants that we have now integrated? And if not, how can we facilitate their integration? If we look at the European-wide data set and we compare the risk of poverty for immigrants and natives. Now, if the bar is here, 1 means that immigrants and natives have the same probability of being in poverty. If the bar is above 1, this means that immigrants have higher probability of being in poverty than natives. The blue bars mean non-EU immigrants. The reddish bars mean EU immigrants. And if the bar is white, it means that the difference between natives and immigrants is not significant. In any case, the largest number of bars is about 1. This means immigrants seem to have a lot higher risk of being in poverty than natives across Europe, with a few exceptions. Down the line. Now, the survey 215 NGOs in Europe, all across Europe, again to gain insights into what are the risk of social and labor market exclusion of immigrants and ethnic minorities. We find that risk is very high. So you see this is no risk, low risk, medium risk, high risk, very high risk. Most answers are in medium, high risk, or very high risk for exclusion of ethnic minorities and immigrant minorities. If you compare 2007 to the blue bar and 2010 the red bar, we see actually that the situation has worsened. Many more people now report that there is high risk of exclusion of those minorities. And this is indeed confirmed in this diagram, which shows the question was, is this risk decreasing, constant, or increasing? And we see that a large proportion says the risk is increasing. These were NGOs working in the field of ethnic minority integration and immigrant integration. And many of these people were actually ethnic minorities themselves, or immigrant organizations, or organizations run by ethnic minorities or immigrant minorities. And the difference was not significant between those who were run by ethnic minorities or immigrant minorities and those who were more general about social inclusion of any vulnerable groups of people. What we try to do a simple exercise to somehow gauge the integration challenges for different ethnic minorities for each country in Europe. And what we plot here is the risk of exclusion. Here is the highest risk. 5 is the highest risk, highest possible, so very, very high risk. 1 means no risk. And the trend in that risk. So this is decreasing, constant, increasing. This means the farther you are from the origin here, the higher is the risk and the more growing is that risk. The message is in general that all major immigrant groups, most immigrant groups are at serious risk of exclusion, and this risk is growing. An example is Germany, Africans, Turks, immigrants from the former Soviet Union and from former Yugoslavia, all are in the top right quadrant. That means their risk is very high and increasing. Generally, that picture is confirmed for most EU 15 countries. EU 15 meaning countries before the 2004 enlargement. You see Moroccans, Asians, and Albanians in Italy. Asians seem to have quite some variation. In Italy, for example, they are more in the upper right quadrant, but in many countries, they enter somewhere here. They seem to, in some countries, they seem to do very well, or relatively balanced. But in general, most immigrant minorities, immigrant groups in Europe are at risk of social and market inclusion. Now, if you look at Central and Eastern Europe, and Hungary here is a good example, these are mainly autochthonous minorities because that's what we, this was research about ethnic and immigrant minorities, and we took the largest minorities. So for Central and Eastern Europe, these are mostly autochthonous meaning not of immigrant or not of recent immigrant origin, but people who were born here. And the ancestors, their parents and grandparents are from these countries. We see Roma being very much to the right and top of the matrix, and other minorities doing relatively well in these countries. How much time do I have? Thank you. Now, another myth, I should say, about immigrants and their integration into the labor market is that they abuse welfare. So the typical argument is that immigrants come to a certain country because they want to get the welfare, and then we see that, oh yes, they are more likely to be in welfare, right? To be in welfare take-up. So we have a larger project about this, and we've done 2 exercises. One was to answer the question, do immigrants really go to countries which are welfare generous? Or, in other words, if a country increases its welfare spending, does this attract further immigrants? The answer is no. We compiled a large data set a panel data set about immigration into a number of European countries. We ran a few regressions, statistical analysis, and we found that this is not what's going on. If a country increases its welfare spending or unemployment benefits or other, it does not attract further immigration. Now the other question that we tried to answer was, do really immigrants take up welfare more than natives? Are they really more dependent on welfare than natives? Now how should we answer this question? Well, one possibility would be to look at the raw data. So we just, again, as in one of the previous slides, if it's 1, this means immigrants and natives have the same probability of being in welfare. If it's above 1, immigrants are more likely to be in welfare than natives. This is unemployment benefits. What we see across Europe, these are European countries, and the blue bars are non-EU, the red bars are EU, white bars are not significant, no significant difference. We see that indeed in raw data, in most countries, we do find that immigrants are more likely to be in welfare than natives. Now, is this confirmed then? Well, I say no, because what we need to do is to compare likes with likes. We need to compare people in similar situation. We need to compare people with similar characteristics. So in this diagram, what we do is that we control for differences in characteristics, meaning education, age, etc., for immigrants and natives. We see that if the bar here is above 0, this means that immigrants are more likely to be in welfare than natives, ceteris paribus. We find that the picture is much different. Now, only a few countries remain where the probability of being in unemployment benefit take-up is larger for immigrants than natives. Now, another thing is that we need to control for eligibility. We need to compare people, in similar situation, meaning their characteristics, but also whether they are in fact eligible for unemployment benefits in these countries. And if we do so, if we control for that, we see that in fact the picture has changed dramatically. Most countries are around 0, but a larger number of countries have immigrants less likely to be in take-up of unemployment benefits than natives. Okay, so the typical picture is this. This is what people see. But if we compare ceteris paribus people with the same characteristics, the picture is changing already quite significantly. But if we compare people who are eligible, the picture is dramatically different. So here we argue that the whole debate is a bit ill-informed and misplaced, because the true question is, how to attract skilled immigrants and those who are attached to the labor market with such characteristics that they don't become so dependent. Okay? And the second question is, how to enable those who are already in our countries to take up welfare benefits if needed. Because here we seem to observe some discrimination or some barriers to welfare take-up. And welfare take-up is not only about keeping people out of jobs, it's also enabling. Unemployment benefits not only have this negative effect of, okay, I don't need to work because if I don't work, I get so many forints or so many euros. It's also about enabling people to find better jobs if they get unemployed and to sustain their purchasing power and sustain their families. What are the barriers that immigrants typically face in the labor markets in Europe? Well, discrimination, education, language, but also institutional barriers and internal barriers. Sometimes you can call it cultural barriers coming from within the community. In some communities, it's not usual that women work or that different kinds of things. So these might be barriers originating from within the community. Sometimes it's argued that immigrants and ethnic minorities do not really want any change. They are happy in that situation. We should not care about this. This is what they want, and this is what they have. So we asked about this in the same survey. About this were almost 400 respondents in this one. Again, non-governmental organizations from all over Europe, many of them representing ethnic minorities, many of them run by ethnic minorities and immigrant minorities. Almost all minorities want to change their situation. 86% of all respondents, and in fact here, 98% of minority respondents. Minority respondents meaning organizations run and led by ethnic minorities themselves. Where are these changes needed and wanted? Paid employment, education, attitudes, and housing. One could say the usual suspects, but this also tells me that looking at employment and labor market for ethnic minorities is needed and has some value, because this is what ethnic minorities and immigrant minorities want to change. Another question would be how? Okay? How should we do this? I'm not going to provide you with exhausting answer, but I'm going to show you one interesting finding that came out from this survey. We asked about what's the preferred policy principle. How do you want the government or whoever to help you to change the situation? And we offered a couple of options: equal treatment, specific provisions, positive discrimination, other. Most respondents, a large majority of respondents, say they prefer equal treatment. There is some room for specific provisions or for positive discrimination, especially for the most vulnerable groups. Representatives of when we discussed some most vulnerable groups in Europe, we were a bit more likely to observe these answers. Equal treatment seems to be the key. So to conclude, in Europe, we seem to need immigrants. We seem to need immigration from outside Europe. But immigration policies are often lacking and often even backfiring. An example would be Germany, although recently we see more positive developments there. We see that integration policy has only limited success. And I think one of the reasons is that the debate about immigration in Europe is still informed, and what we need is a paradigmatic shift, because we should not talk about abuse of welfare, for example, but about access to welfare. We should not talk about allowing immigrants on our sacred soul or some kind of fortress Europe argument. We should talk about how to win the best brains in the global competition for talent. And I'm saying that so far we're missing an opportunity. We seem not to be able to win the best immigrants in the global competition, and we still talk about abuse, whereas it's more about access to all kinds of social and labor market services in Europe. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if you're taking questions.
2 minutes for questions. No, we will have time for debating by the end, but no, just for clarification or for information.
Just one question. We have some charts showing the risk of social and labor market exclusion. And in the Hungarian chart, you spoke about non-third country nationals, that is to say EU country nationals, ethnic Hungarians preferably. But in the Italian chart, which you specifically showed, you didn't specify anything else. And I would be interested, for example, the Romanian population, Romanian migrants, immigrants in Italy. Not Roma, Romanian.
Romanian, okay, sorry, Romanian.
Just to see how the different conclusions can be taken?
Yeah, thank you. We covered the four, because okay, there was a limited size of the questionnaire, so we covered the four largest groups. Romanians do not yet form one of the top four groups in Italy, but indeed that would be very interesting to compare, for example, immigrants, post-enlargement immigrants and other immigrants, and we would be really keen on seeing this, but unfortunately I don't have these numbers. That'll be interesting.
This possibility for clarification, clarification. You had a survey, and it was somewhere referred it is based on expert opinions. What you had, what was really the basis of all this information? Because it was not clarified, and it strongly influences the result.
Yes, thank you. So I combined many
very last
results from. Okay, so you mean
the very last survey.
This one, for example.
Yeah, because it seemed to be opinions of experts.
No, this is let me count 370 NGO representatives, non-government organizations, who some of them are, well, all of them are dealing with ethnic minority issues, immigrant integration issues, etc. And I think 30% of them are actually run by ethnic groups concerned themselves. So this is the survey. All over Europe, yes. We have all European countries represented. Yes.
Just for clarification as well, in the chart, when you were mentioning Germany, Africans actually tops the 5 out of the other minorities. But coming to Hungary, it does not come into the chart. Is there any specific reason for this?
The only reason is that for all the countries, for each country, we picked 4 largest groups. So, of course, we had to adapt certain rules, how to limit the dimensionality of the questionnaires to make it still, to have some answers, still some responses. So we had to limit the survey to 4 largest minorities in the country. Africans are not yet, or not at the time, they were not among the 4 largest minorities in Hungary. That's why they're not included. And of course, we would love to see, all the ethnic minorities in these countries, but also because we wanted to sort of be control for the reliability of the answers. We only focus on 4 largest minorities.
So, Professor Karablet, thank you very much indeed for this amazing and challenging presentation, providing for us an overall very broad framework for our further discussions and offering a better understanding of the results of our Hungarian research. Also, I have to say, all our findings are consistent with the ISA report. There is really no conflicting information. Just to quote you a few results concerning the opinion of the Hungarian experts. Related to the risk on the Hungarian labor market, that third world immigrants will contribute to the increase of unemployment in Hungarian population. 70% of the Hungarian experts disagree with this statement. This is really good to know, but most of the Hungarian experts don't agree with this type of statement. Also, most of the assessment of the Hungarian experts on the impact of the third world migrants on the Hungarian national economy is quite positive. The most positive judgment is from public administration and from research, and the most negative from entrepreneurs and from trade unions in this field. And just one more example, 63, two-thirds of the Hungarian experts told that, considering everything put together, they think the presence of third world nationals on the Hungarian labor market is beneficial. Also positive, beneficial. So, just a few comments. Then, we have also some findings on the situation of Africans in Hungary, and I have to say, however, the segregation in Hungary is not too strong, and the labor market discrimination is not too strong. And the most problematic group is seasonal workers and undocumented workers. From country perspective, I have to say, African population, we have mostly Nigerians in our town, are one of the most at-risk group for different type of objective indicators of labor market discrimination. And Africans are certainly one of the less integrated groups into the Hungarian society. However, you can't compare the situation of the Hungarian integration with Italy or with Western Europe. It's quite different. So, but let's have a start. My task, as far as I see in 25 minutes, is to focus on two issues. One is the conceptual framework of the Hungarian research and some key elements of thinking in terms of integration, and also some key concepts related to the new phenomenon of migration throughout Europe and Hungary. And my second part of the presentation will focus on will be a kind of introductory part of our research. Key questions, methodology, and so on. With the Italian situation, with France, with Germany, even last time, even Denmark has some problems with the Schengen Treaty. In Hungary, still, we don't have open and clear ethnic conflicts, no ghettos, no clear public scandals related to discrimination. There are some isolated events, but this is not really an important political issue. If you compare to the huge challenge in Hungary of the integration of the Roma ethnic origin Hungarian population, and you compare the migrants integration issue, there is no real comparison in the importance for the Hungarian policy making and society. The question is about, there are different estimates, for 1% of the Hungarian population, and for the labor market, depending on whether I include gray and black labor or not, the estimates might be different, but it's not more than 100,000 persons. So from this point of view, it's quite understandable. This is a marginalized question in public debate. But Hungary is in the first, or if you want, in the third but initial phases of new migration phenomenon. Now with a change in character and facing all the challenges Professor Kahanets mentioned for the future. Hungary is one of the European countries in the most difficult demographic situation. And despite all the dilemmas of tackling the budgetary deficit and the medium-term consequences of the crisis, and despite all the emphasis made by the Hungarian government for using mainly Hungarian labor reserves for economic development. For a number of reasons already mentioned, Hungary will not be able to avoid. Also, if we make a volume statement, not only should not avoid, but has to try to use as much as possible, in the best way, the opportunities offered by immigration and by immigration from third world countries. Also, you told about the reasons for the outstanding importance of this issue. So if we start, permanent migration remains significant. In the international migration today is increasingly temporary, short-term, circular, and multi-directional. We will report about the results, but in Hungary, more than half of the immigration of the last years is a temporary type migration. Of temporary is a concept on the level of intentions. As this trend continues, countries like Hungary, that were once relatively unaffected by migration, are seeing this phenomenon as a challenge, highlighting the need for migrant integration efforts to be flexible and responsive to the new situation. I didn't use the concept of flexicurity for this. This is something also to debate how useful the way of thinking in terms of flexicurity might be for Hungary. As you told about, and I don't want to expand too much, there is a kind of public anxiety and sometimes even fears, and especially in this time of economic downturn and with unemployment very high and persisting in Hungary. So migrants are sometimes perceived as competitors for jobs on the Hungarian labor market, exerting downward pressure on salaries as a burden on the welfare system. I have to say, in our research, absolutely no evidence for this. The opposite is true. These perceptions are largely unfounded. In Hungary at least, migrants tend to concentrate in just a few sectors. Construction, seasonal work in agriculture, special commercial activities with the Asian community typically, for instance, domestic services, healthcare, and also some top-level multinational people working in the sphere of multinational enterprises. These sectors tend to be those in which there is a deficit in the Hungarian labor market. So, there is no, I'm not against competition, don't misunderstand me, but there is no real competition on the Hungarian labor market between labor force coming from third countries and the Hungarian active population. So, I have to speak about the concept of integration, key for our research, but key as a social and political and economic and cultural challenge for the Hungarian society as a whole. There are four basic forms of social integration: acculturation, placement, interaction, and identification. Acculturation, or if you like it better, socialization, is the process by which an individual and also a community, a small group, acquires the knowledge, cultural standards, and competencies needed to interact successfully in a society. In Hungary, as we know, in the past 2 decades, the ethnic Hungarian immigration has been prevailing in Hungary. From which is very much changing in the last few years and will change even more in the future. But at the moment, because of this fact, and because of the prevailing percentage of immigrants came from the neighboring country, the problem of acculturation is not very high from Hungarian perspective. The second key issue is replacement or structural integration. Structural integration means an individual is a concept related to the social reproduction process. An individual gaining a position in society, in educational, economic systems, in the professions, or, and very importantly, as a citizen. Also, placement means not just an individual position, but also the rights related to it, the rights associated with particular positions, and the opportunity to establish social relations and to win cultural, social, and economic capital. The cultural, social, and economic capital from a given conceptual framework are key issues for third country immigrants in Hungary. Acculturation is, of course, a precondition for placement. Interaction is the third dimension. Interaction is the formation of relationships and networks by individuals who share a mutual orientation. These include friendships. Migrants even have sometimes sex. Surprising, but so romantic relationships or marriages or more general membership of social groups. The fourth dimension is identification, referring to an individual identification with a social system. The person sees him or herself as part of a collective body or excluded from it. Identification has both cognitive and emotional aspects. To go further in conceptualizing integration, there are different perspectives to look at the phenomena of integration as it relates to the relationship between the incoming groups, the immigrants, and the native population, the hosting society. The first issue is the social integration of migrants into the existing systems of the receiving society. From the other side, the consequences of social integration for the social structures of the receiving society. So there is an impact on immigrants and on the receiving society. And the overall consequences of social integration or partial or non-integration for the societal integration or system integration of the receiving society. Facing immigration in Hungary and receiving our immigrants with smiling Hungarian society will change, has to change, and does change. Maybe I don't enter details now, the different aspects of integration more in details. Just to go more in detail with social integration. Social integration can be defined as the inclusion and acceptance of immigrants into the core institutions, relationships, and positions of a host society. This is very importantly an interactive process between immigrants and the host society. For the host society, integration means opening up institutions and granting equal opportunities to immigrants. But there is no balance. The main responsibility is on our side and not on the side of migrants. In this interaction, the host society has more resources, more power, and more prestige. Because integration is also a kind of power relation, don't forget it. Integration is not the only possible outcome of the arrival of immigrants into a society. Instead, there is also the way of reproduction of ethnic identity and integration into an ethnic colony. And this can result social segregation from the majority culture. In segmented integration into a subculture, typically urban underclass, look at Marseille, look at Paris, look at Hamburg, look at Berlin, or in marginalization from both the host society and the ethnic colony. In Hungary, this type of colonialization does not exist too much. However, if you look at the specific features, for instance, of the Chinese community in Hungary, this is typically a closed society with some characteristics also of ethnic colony. But the ghetto, the colonialization is not a real top-level political challenge in Hungary. Also from this perspective, I would say, relates to the debate on multiculturalism in Western Europe, without willing to enter this debate. Because of the lack of this type of colonialization, in Hungary the actual debate is about the acceptance and the ability of acceptance to be different and to reduce prejudices, but the question is not about multiculturalism in the present Hungarian society. Integration is an ongoing process also in Hungary. The policies and requirements of successful integration can be related to the above fourth dimension of social integration, we just mentioned, but the starting point of our research is certainly labor market integration. Is the cornerstone of social integration. There is no social integration without labor market integration, and this is also the main focus of our research. It's maybe something you have no time to mention in detail, but we speak about migration, immigrants, third country workers. There is a huge variety and internal heterogeneity within this society. There are two, but at least three straits in the migrant community in Hungary. From one side, elegant people, people like us, international civil servants, managers of top-level companies, or even call center employees. They have more freedom, broad possibilities, better living and work, outstanding as compared to the Hungarian society, living and working conditions. And this is a growing number in the Hungarian society. Their problem is transnationalism, their problem is Europeanization, and whatever. Nice life, happy life in most cases, and good ways of integration. At the other hand, migrants at the bottom of the society treat each other, undocumented work, social exclusion, discrimination, and increasing inequalities from the other side. That's the double-faced character, but you can find a lot of groups between. For instance, the Chinese small commerce is neither rich top elegant nor the 3D type. So for small enterprises are very specific for also, but the only issue, and we don't have time to describe this in very much in detail, this one has to be very careful to generalize on the integration of migrants in Hungary. This is an extremely stratified society with full social exclusion and with fancy lives. Don't forget this while trying to translate in your activities and way of thinking the results of this research. I don't enter details of labor mobility because I have no time for it. Just mentioning a few key concepts for the understanding of research result. The concept of temporary and circular migration has already been mentioned. Circular migration is a rapidly developing form of migration with a lot of benefits of migration throughout Europe and also in Hungary, also in relation with third country nationals. There are some rapidly developing new forms of circular mobility, like expatriation, business migration, and transnationalism. I just mentioned maybe the transnationalism, where the question of integration with these different schizophrenic, but no, not schizophrenic, with being in full harmony, different type of identities, is a very special process, the integration of people in transnational situation and way of thinking. In Hungary, the Chinese community and the Vietnamese community are in a very special position from this point of view. The bounded mobility concept, just one remark, and this is also a recent concept, emphasizing very much the importance of individual characteristics, psychosocial characteristics on the different processes of migration, including labor migration. The adult worker model, also just one comment, emphasizes the importance of the family dimension of migration and the integration of migrants. Now I have a few minutes just to speak about our research. The title of the research, and this is very important, is Challenges of the Labor Market Integration in Hungary, Opportunities and Limits of Third Country Nationals. Done by Panta Rhei Research Agency, led by Dr. Juha, as you did sitting there, and once again, thank you, supported by the European Integration Fund. And this is not just the financial support, but we appreciate very much the technical, political interest. The DG and the fund have behind this support. The aims of the research have been as follows. First, and of course, an evidence-based description and analysis of the state and processes of the labor market, social and cultural integration of third country nationals in Hungary. Also, the analysis of the Hungarian labor market needs in the limits of possibilities, I have to say, for the employment of third country nationals. At future scenarios and policy options, I have no time to know, but all this under the conditions of very, very high uncertainty. How to forecast the participation of third world nationals when we have no clear forecast on the development of the Hungarian labor market. So, we made all we could in the limits of the possibilities. The migration research is very difficult. I don't enter no detail. It's very difficult in identifying migrants, in sampling with migrant population, and it's very difficult to prepare interviews with them. Also, you can't avoid characteristic biases in migration research. Your sample will always have a bias of higher class people, better speaking Hungarian people, dwellers of Budapest and larger communities and so on and so on. So certainly one of the results is that this situation in our sound is a bit better than the real situation because of this characteristic biases of standardized migration research. That's the reason. And understanding the complexity of the issue and all the different types of uncertainties, they require the use of multiple complementary methods of information gathering, like literature review, secondary analysis of existing statistical data and empirical literature. Thank you, it has just been published, the first synthesizing work on the situation of migration in Hungary. One of the authors is here and will make the presentation. It was very helpful in our work. Maybe we made the first content analysis of the press, of the media on this issue. Then we had survey and in-depth interviews with key informants or experts of different groups, and quantitative survey in the target group, which are third country migrants working in Hungary, using questionnaire and focused interviews with migrants. So, the research has been carried out between September 2010 and April 2011. This is just fresh like the bread in front of us Monday morning. Has been just prepared. It's still a draft. We had 55 specially selected interviews, speaking all the existing languages of different Hungarian communities. Also, the selection of the sound has been made partly on the basis of the social network of interviewers, with a lot of benefits, but also a number of risks. This impacts also on the character of the sound. We had finally 445 valid completed questionnaires with an average length of 86 minutes. 10 in-depth interviews with migrants, 53 expert questionnaires, and 23 expert-focused interviews. But we will report on this after the break, after some of the presentations, mainly by the end of the second work session. Now, if you have, I don't give for myself more than 2 minutes if there are some questions of clarification. But the facts and the evidences of our research will come later. So, no questions, thank you so much. Now we have a break of 20 minutes, is not? 20 minutes, yes, and then we go back and we continue. Thank you.